to go yet. But I think one of the big questions the public want to know is when it was publicly stated at the time that all of the top presenters and staff in RTE were required to take substantial pay cuts, did Ryan Tubridy or Noel Kelly resist or refuse those pay cuts, and were they involved in some plan to cover up and conceal secret payments that went through the barter account involving Renault, the so-called tripart agreement? I think that's the nub of the issue that has instigated this entire scandal. I do note this morning, apparently Ryan Tubridy and Noel Kelly are disputing almost every aspect of the accounts that have been given today. So the plot thickens when it comes to the situation in RTE, and it's very difficult to reconcile the different evidence that now appears to be being given by the different parties. But the public deserve to know who was responsible for the deception of the public, of the RTE staff who were forced to endure pay cuts, and of the Oireachtas who were told that everybody did endure pay cuts. So that's the matter we have to get to the truth of, and let's hope we get a little bit closer to it. The other big issue for us, though, that beyond the sort of immediate controversy that sparked this situation, is the long-term future of RTE and public service broadcasting, and it is our firm view that the ordinary workers, journalists and staff of RTE should not be the victims of the malgovernance or deception that was orchestrated by a small number of people at the top, and we need to hold the government to account for its flawed funding model for RTE that pushed RTE in a particular direction, which has led to this controversy. So we need the government to own up to its responsibility and have a proper funding model for RTE that ensures it's not corrupted, if you like, by the influence of commercial or advertising, and that secures its public service mandate and guarantees the future of ordinary RTE workers who've had no hand or part in creating this scandal and this controversy in the first place. So that's just on RTE. I just want to say the other thing, it's going to be massively overshadowed obviously by all of this, but in the last week of the Dáil before the summer recess, we have been pushing for weeks for the Minister for Housing to answer questions and to address major problems that have emerged in the aftermath of the lifting of the eviction ban. Now, we argued very strongly, and we still believe the decision to lift the eviction ban has had disastrous consequences. It's leading to every month more and more families, working people, children being driven into homelessness. But the government said that they were going to introduce mitigating measures, most notably the tenant in situ scheme. And we've been saying for weeks now there's massive problems with the tenant in situ scheme. I mean, we argued very strongly in favour of the introduction of that scheme, but the problem is, in many situations, either landlords are refusing to engage with local authorities who are trying to buy property to prevent evictions. The most notable example of that is Tahanny House, where the residents are absolutely terrified at the moment that they are facing imminent homelessness when they did nothing wrong, because the landlord who's evicting them on grounds of sale is simply saying, well, he's totally ignoring the communications from Dublin City Council about purchasing it. So he's really appears to be the definition of the brutal, inhumane landlord who doesn't care about the tenants ending up homeless and isn't even willing to engage with Dublin City Council about trying to prevent them being made homeless by allowing the council to buy the property. Now, the government have to do something about that to ensure that there's a first refusal policy and that landlords are required to engage with local authorities or approved housing bodies in cases where people may end up evicted. And that's just one instance. We have another case out in Swords at the moment, which is very similar, a mass eviction taking place. And then we have a whole number of situations where local authorities seem to be looking for excuses not to buy properties where tenants are being evicted on grounds of sale. And one very significant example that's emerged is on the question of management fees, right? So in Dunleary Rathdown, and we met some of the people involved in this yesterday, people who are being evicted on grounds of sale approach the council and say, will you please buy this property to prevent me being evicted? And the council is saying no, because they're charging management fees in the apartment complex, so we're not going to buy it. Now, that would have huge implications in terms of the effectiveness of tenant in situ, because huge numbers of people who are likely to face evictions on ground of sale will be in multi-unit complexes where there are management fees. If that becomes a reason for not buying property to prevent eviction, huge numbers more of people are going to end up homeless. So we need the government to address these problems with the tenant in situ scheme as an absolute matter of urgency, but we also think, given the record numbers who are homeless, they need to reinstate the emergency eviction ban to prevent even more people being driven into homelessness over the summer months.
Yep, two issues. Firstly, just to pay tribute to RTE and the RTE Investigates team for the really excellent programme produced last night about the dirty secret of the dairy industry and what it exposed about what is quite horrific treatment of young calves, young dairy bull calves, hundreds of thousands of whom are exported alive in horrific conditions, crammed in hundreds into lorries, and like widespread flouting of the animal welfare laws that exist in terms of breaking the laws about rest periods, breaking the laws about water, milk, food. Really horrendous. One shown last night, calves packed in for an 18-and-a-half-hour journey without appropriate rest or without any food in that whole time. Also, what we saw in Ireland in terms of beating of calves with sticks, throwing them, again, all flagrant breaches of the animal welfare legislation. I think one thing that was very powerful about the programme is that it got to the heart of the matter, which is that this happens because of the way the dairy industry is set up, in that these animals are effectively worthless. They have a very, very low value. And what flows from that is that it isn't possible to export these animals alive in a way that is humane and economical. You can either do it humanely or you can do it economically, and obviously the drive is to do it economically. So we have written to the Business Committee seeking a debate on this week. The Department of Agriculture has announced an investigation. That's welcome, but the Minister should come before the Dáil, say what the terms of the investigation are, and the Dáil should debate it before it rises for the summer recess. For us, the answer is very clear. We need a ban on live animal exports, as there is a ban on live animal exports from New Zealand, as recently, because of court decision in Brazil, there's a ban on live animal exports there, and as the British government was even moving in the direction of a ban before the Tory government reversed course. So that's really what needs to happen in terms of protecting animal welfare. We blame the government for incentivising more and more farmers to go into the dairy industry, to expand. It's their responsibility, and we need to ensure that small and medium farmers don't lose out in the transition to a much more sustainable form of agriculture, and are given support to do so, including payments for using sexed semen, which would significantly reduce the number of bull dairy calves that we have. The second issue that we'll be raising this week is about cluster bombs. It was, a heralded achievement of the Irish government over 10 years ago to have the agreement of now over 120 countries to sign up to promise not to use cluster bombs. But we have the horrific spectacle of the US government now saying that they're going to send cluster bombs to the Ukrainian government, where they'll be used there. We know that if cluster bombs are used, and outrageously they have been used by Russia in this conflict, which we absolutely condemn, but they will maim and kill children and others in Ukraine for decades and decades to come. In the 50 years since the war in Vietnam ended, 20,000 people in Laos have been killed as a result of these unexploded ordinances, and half of those are children. Because what happens is a large percentage of these bombs don't explode upon impact, are like buried in the ground, later are discovered or walked on and explode with horrific consequences. I mean, they estimate that in Laos it'll be another 50 years before all of these bombs are dealt with. So we'll be calling on the government to have a clear condemnation of the sending of cluster bombs, and to call on the US to withdraw from that position and not to send these bombs, which will have such devastating impact above all for Ukrainian children in the years and decades to come.